Most welcome participants. We shall be starting in the next 2 minutes. We shall be starting in the next 2 minutes. You're most welcome. Great. It is exactly 2 o'clock, and I want us to start. Before we start, I want to welcome each and every one of you making it on time, and thank you very much for participating in our webinar. I can see from my table here, we are 125 already participants. Let's start with a word of prayer, and then I'll introduce the topic. Then we shall dive into the presentation immediately. Let's pray. Father, Lord in heaven, I want to thank you very much for this opportunity that you've given us to have this webinar. Father, thank you that we are still alive and well. That you've given us opportunity to be able to attend this webinar. And Father, thank you that we shall be able to learn. I pray that each and every one of us will get something out of this presentation. And we pray that it will bring glory and honor to your name. In Jesus' mighty name I have prayed. So you're most welcome. Thank you very much for making it on time. We already have our panelists. Dennis is already here. And I'll be starting off with introducing who he is. As part of an introduction to this, I could say, you might be aware, as all of us are aware, coronavirus, which causes the COVID-19, is significantly impacting businesses and the economy. Unfortunately, money launderers and fraudsters may also be exploiting COVID-19 pandemic to their advantage. The Financial Intelligence Authority, one of our panelists works, recently published a statement to all reporting entities under the Anti Money Laundering Act 2013 on the concerns related to COVID-19 and the measures to combat money laundering and terrorist financing activities. Criminals may try to take advantage of the current situation. People and reporting entities in trouble may conduct criminal activity and attempt to compensate for financial losses. Remote working hasn't helped matters, and so it's not hard to see why these prices can present a fertile ground for fraud. So that's the background to this webinar. And as you may be aware, as accountants, under Schedule 2 of the Anti Money Laundering Act 2013, it provides for the categories of accountable persons. The first, number one, is advocates as defined by the Advocates Act. And the second, people are accountants as defined by Accountants Act. So we are one of the people who are accountable persons. So why accountable persons need to know? So this is the reason why we are running this webinar, because we are supposed to know what they are going to be sharing with us. You, my name is Joseph, CPA Joseph Kagwa. I'm a member of the disciplinary committee of ICPAU, and some of these things that we are seeing are happening, and we want to make sure that we warn you early so that you don't fall culprit to this. So our first presenter is CPA Dennis Echeru. He's the General Manager, Risk Management, Centenary Bank. He has been with the bank for over 8 years. Cheru has so many credentials, but I'll summarize them. He's a fellow of the Chartered Certified Accountants of the UK. He has a certificate in quantitative risk management. As I already said, he's a CPA, so he's a member of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants. He has 2 masters. He has a Master's of Finance Control and Management from Amity University, India. He also has a Master's of Business Administration from Edinburgh Business School. He has an international certificate in banking risk and regulation, and as well as so many other certifications. He's a certified credit analyst, and he also holds a Bachelor of Commerce Accounting, which he got from Makerere University. Without any further ado, I want to introduce to you Dennis Echeru, General Manager, Risk Management, Centenary Bank. Kindly take us through this presentation. Fraud and money laundering in the COVID crisis, what an accountable person needs to know. Before he starts off, I can see we are now over 250. Before he starts off, I'm going to ask us not to use the chat. The chat room is going to be for Wolokoso, lack of a better word. But if you want to ask questions, kindly use the Q&A. So our panelists will concentrate on the Q&A, where we shall have, in case you have any questions, kindly put them in that Q&A chat room. That's where they will be answered. And for Holocaust, you can use the chat, but Q&A, and use the Q&A for question and answers. Over to you, Dennis, and I'll have exactly 30 minutes starting now.
Thank you so much, Joseph. It's 2:05, and I should be done by 2:35. Thank you for the introduction. I wouldn't want to go any further wasting time. Thank you for inviting me to present for this topic. The topic is pretty clear: frauds and money laundering in COVID-19 crisis. What an accountable person needs to know. There are like 5 keywords there, which I think we, as accountants and probably lawyers and other accountable people, we all need to know as I'll be presenting. And these words are, number 1, of course, is fraud. That is just my outlook of what I'll do, but I just want to go. Number 1 is fraud. Number 2 is money laundering. This should not be strange words for accountants, because I'm pretty sure that they went through. Number 3 is, of course, COVID, which is a new thing, COVID-19. Joseph has already told us what damage it has done, but I would want to go further and show you how this COVID can really make fraud thrive if we don't handle it carefully. Of course, the accountable persons, as you stated, clearly put clear. So just to give a background, we need to understand COVID first. COVID-19 is a critical thing, but is it a crisis? Yes, it is. It is a crisis because of a number of things. It's a surprise. It's something came abrupt. You can see how it took the world by surprise all over, whatever, whether you're mighty power or what, COVID, the way it came, it was really a big surprise. And then, of course, the crisis. It poses a lot of uncertainty. Up to now, people are still struggling. Some companies never had in their business continuity whether there was COVID-19 coming. So they are just trying to come up and see what can we do. What are we going to be like in the next 1 year? What are we going to be like in the next 5 years? There's a lot of uncertainty. COVID-19 has of course, had a lot of effect on human life, leave alone the lives lost, but economically, socially, culturally, politically, and technologically, as I'll be discussing, it has had a lot of impact. Geographically, as I said, it has affected the whole globe. Globally, the COVID-19 is now known by almost pretty everybody, even children at home. They'll tell you coronavirus. There is no vaccine as yet, although we know that a lot of effort is being done to see that we a vaccine is got for this, and we hope that this is done pretty soon so that lives can be saved. There's a lot of course, time pressure on this, and we don't know when this will happen. And most significant is also the resource allocation. There's a lot of resource allocation now. A lot of budgets are being reviewed all over the world, and a lot of money is needed for research. So that makes it a crisis. And therefore, where there is a crisis, definitely frauds and money laundering tend to thrive. Of course, there are certain areas where companies do better when they're in crisis. But this crisis will also make fraudsters and money launderers thrive because of the nature of issues they bring across. And I'll be demonstrating that as I continue. You realize that just to give you statistics of this COVID, you can see as at 29th, that was yesterday, the total number of reported cases is at 10,021,401. And the death rate has gone up, and new cases have also gone up. You can see that map. The concentrated colors is where you see the death rate is high and the numbers have gone. But these are only numbers which are known. What about those which are not known? So again, that makes it serious. I can still confirm that by region, of course, America is leading with 5 million now. Europe is at 2.6 million. Eastern Mediterranean is at 1 million. Southeast Asia is at 735. Africa, we are at 288,347. And then Western Pacific is at 240. All these statistics are from the World Health Organization. I just wanted to bring this background to show you that, yes, COVID is a serious thing, and therefore attracts a lot of resources. And where money is concerned and resources, then we shall be able to discuss fraud, how fraud then and money laundering comes in. As you can realize, in Uganda, as I said earlier, yes, the figures looked small 2 months ago, but the numbers are continuing to go up, although we don't have any deaths. We thank God for that, and we hope that really everybody survives and as soon as the vaccine is got. So that is one thing we want to praise for that. So quickly, let me just give you a few things which COVID, the effects of COVID, leave alone the death and the life. We are losing lives, we are losing. But the effects it's causing, I think it's important that we just have a quick sight of this. I'll try to manage my time. We have had a number of industries really affected, and among those, the potential losers among those which have been highly hit, we have the financial services sector, the aviation and maritime, automobiles, tourism. You know, tourism has been real hit. Oil and gas also has been hit, manufacturing, construction, real estate, and education. Of course, you know, education up to now, schools, universities, colleges are not open, and we are not sure when they'll open. That alone also has its effect. So economically, the pandemic has had adverse effects in the world. Economies have had significant effects in the following sectors, as I stated. But most important to note is that more funds are now being channeled to research, budget cuts and reallocation of resources taking place in most of the economies and the governments. Unemployment rates are rocketing. Most companies, as you know, others have actually laid some employees already. Others are planning to do that. So again, that is a challenge. There's a significant drop in business activity, even in our country. And the cancellation of travel plans and meetings, all these disruptions have really had an effect economically. And you know that for Uganda, our country, the GDP growth rate has come down. So all this has serious effects and repercussions. But most important to note that as I'll be discussing how fraud therefore thrives on this, it is all these things are happening with there were no plans, no business continuity plans, no recovery plans, strategy plans have to be changed, all this, and that will definitely cause a lot of resource diversion. And this, if not done well, will be misallocated. I'll be showing you how fraud therefore comes in. Socially, our lifestyles have been affected, me and you, and everybody else out there. People have had to readjust their budgets and try to live within the means. And others have gone without food. Others are really in a dire need. They need all this. And when people in that situation, the fraud and money laundering tend to thrive. They look for some dirty means to survive, which is not good. Also, you note that you have had schools, as I said, they are closed, entertainment places, bars, beaches, all this, our social life has been affected. I said earlier, increase in unemployment is one thing, which is very, very serious. And when you have a lot of people unemployed, they were already underemployed, now they are unemployed, it even worsens, the situation becomes worse. So that is something, again, I think COVID-19 makes life even much more harder. You want to look at technologically. We've had a lot of financial technology. Digitalization is now the era. People are talking from working from home, online, virtual meetings, all this. But all these have its repercussions. Yes, we may be managing business, but again, if you are procuring a system which you never had a plan, you might hurry because of COVID, and where you're procuring it from, it can be a challenge. Somebody can manipulate you, and that is the beginning of fraud. So that is, again, another challenge. As I said, there's an increased use of plastic rather than cash, which is a good thing probably. Promotion of the digital banking, remote online working platforms, that is at home, for working from home, is something now being talked around everywhere as a new normal. E-commerce platform, business to consumer online platforms that are delivering goods and supplies to people. That's another good thing, of course, which is there's a positive part of it. But again, this, as I said, system risk is high, where the people use the systems and they probably did not procure the right ones. That is where you find that cybercrime is actually overriding, is taking over, because that is where the thieves, gone are the days thieves will come and try to do things from, maybe from the bank. For us who work in banking, no, they sit somewhere and they work out, understand your systems, and they'll do that. Now, this is thriving for them. And again, accountants, accountable persons, we need to be cognizant of this. Also, you note that politically, of course, the positive thing, as has been said, it's debatable, but this COVID-19 brought a lot of politicians to united them, which is a good thing, to come and try to work together. But again, there are also challenges. You can see there's a talk about electronic roadmap, electronic elections. All this COVID is brought by COVID. I just wanted to bring those highlights about COVID so that when I'm talking about fraud now and anti-money laundering, we understand that yes, with during this era of COVID, this is definitely will be hitting hard. And therefore, we need to know which areas we should be very careful and which areas we can continue to venture. Quickly, let us go to fraud. I just picked up the key categories of fraud, which we I think accountable people need to know. One is the financial statement fraud. This is the most damaging to the company, overstating of revenues, earnings, understating. You know now most companies have been hit, seriously hit by COVID. They are no longer performing to that expectation. So overstating of figures is something we need to be very careful. And we must, as accountable persons, be able to monitor very closely, as most companies will no longer achieve what they desired earlier. Of course, the other one is the assets misappropriation. And this is basically skimming of cash. It's common mostly in banking and also those cash dealing companies. Again, this is another area, as accountable people, we need to be very careful. The fraud, again, thrives there very clearly. Then we have theft of intellectual property and trade secrets. There are others who want to get into the trademarks and intellectual property, and that is also common now. as people try to procure maybe systems or try to do other things, you need to be very careful whom you are going to procure from, because these people are disguising, they're doing everything, and they will say, yes, that is the company, and you will end up definitely being conned, and that is not something, again, which has to be properly accountable. People need to be careful. Of course, there's also the healthcare insurance and the banking. This is an area where we work. There's a lot of money which goes through the banking industry, insurance, and therefore there is a target area. It's a very big target area, especially for money launderers and also the cybercrime. So this is another area at this particular time where people have now focused on the use of technology, online and digitalization. Again, this can make fraud thrive and money laundering. Then we have the consumer fraud. This is the most common, of course. This is it's ranked one of the topmost now, and this is another area I think where we need. Where do you get all these kinds of phishing, targeted word, people go emails, fake emails, malicious links, all that is the consumer fraud, and that is something, again, we need to take cognizance and be able to manage during this COVID. There's a lot of conning around. People are saying, we're the ones who manufacture this, we can do this for you. This is the right sanitary, protective gears. This is the right sanitizers. So all that it's happening. So fraud can take many shapes and can impact on organization in many ways, not just financially. We therefore should know how and where your company may be vulnerable and take the proper steps to protect against vulnerabilities. That is just a mention of a few areas on how fraud thrives. I just wanted to share with you a survey done by PwC in 2020, this year actually. They came up and they ranked some of these fraud cases. And as I said, you can see their customer fraud was #1, followed by cybercrime, but probably cybercrime has bypassed that now. And then misappropriation of assets, bribery and corruption, accounting and financial statement fraud, procurement fraud. That is another area, as I've been talking about. Human resource fraud is something, again, I'm going to talk about, very critical during this era of COVID-19 pandemic. Deceptive business practices, anti-competitive and antitrust law infringement, money laundering, intellectual property, and insider or unauthorized trading. All these are potential fraud case types, which are about or are even thriving. Of course, it may look too early, but already some of these are happening. It may look too early to have some figures, but this is already happening. It's something we want to manage and see as accountable people. We quickly do that. To go further, what are some of the key potential fraud areas? I just wanted to bring 5 key for take home, because there are many others, but please, procurement is a fertile ground. Procurement in this COVID era, people are trying to procure all kinds of what, but that is an area where fraud and money laundering can thrive in. I've talked about systems, especially the IT systems. People are trying to procure systems, people are trying to work from home. This is an area where fraudsters are specialists, and they are looking into that, because systems fraud is complicated. You don't need to appear, but you work out from somewhere. You do understand somebody's systems, and you'll be able to hack. So it is an area where most companies and organizations have been hit hard. And this is an area, again, we therefore need to be very cognizant and be careful. A lot of systems is something we must manage. Supply chains is related to procurement. It is you should therefore be by now knowing where. I know there has been changes, of course, probably who's going to supply, or some suppliers have dropped out, who is coming in. You need to understand all this and be able to. And that brings me to the next item, which is the third party risk. We have a lot of vendors. Most of our companies, organizations, we deal with vendors. You need to understand, it's actually stated that biggest part of fraud can come from the vendor. And if you don't therefore understand whom you are contracting with, the person you have entered into business, partnership. That is a potential area, and therefore we need to manage it. I'm not saying that we should not go into partnership, we should not go into contract with others. This is inevitable business, we have to do that. But during this era, it is something again which has to be managed properly. Some of the contingent elements of fraud, as I continue to talk about fraud, I'm now coming down almost to individual. I looked at a higher level. I was looking at at a global level. I came down to national. I'm now looking at individual. This is for those of us who work in organizations and probably we're managing people or we want to hire people. These are some of the key areas you want to look at. Integrity. Integrity is very, very key. If a person has integrity, fraud is an afterthought. It is very difficult for fraud, of course, to come in. I think you all know that even at a certain time, I think some organizations look at this, and rightly so. You want to first understand the integrity. The challenge is how do you therefore measure integrity? How do you do due diligence on that? But integrity is very critical. And most people, this is where they fail. You can have everything, beautiful papers or whatsoever, but integrity. Once you see the person's integrity is questionable, please just leave. Warren Buffett said that there are three things you can look out from a person. I think you look at his intelligence, energy, and integrity. And he said if he doesn't have integrity, whether he has intelligence or he has energy, just forget about that person. So this is common. And the challenge is that most of our companies actually have this as one of the values. In most company values, you find integrity is there. But the challenge is, do we practically transform this to reality? Opportunity is something, again, of course, fraud thrives where there's opportunity. Once you create an opportunity, then somebody is bound to be compelled to do that. And this is another area. Incentive, motivation, and pressure are some of the things which are common in fraudsters. And of course, once all they do their things, they tend to rationalize, and that is the attitude problem. So let us look at opportunity. Opportunity. Opportunity, as you can see, is just giving somebody an avenue. Somebody, you give him a chance. Once you create that chance, that avenue, that smooth whatever, then that person is likely to get into fraud. And you can see there that opportunity goes with integrity. I just put there that table. Where opportunity is high and integrity is low, then the risk is very high. The fraud risk is very high. And where integrity is high and opportunity is low, then the fraud risk is also very low. And therefore, that's what you should therefore be looking for as accountant and see how can we have that. It's very, very important. Again, still under opportunity, some of the things that the bad guys look for in an organization, and they stated that good fraudsters study the system and know the warning signs and risk factors to them with the opportunity needed to commit fraud. They look for systematic vulnerabilities to exploit and adopt their plans, and underline the word vulnerabilities. This is really, really an area where fraudsters will look for. Once it's vulnerable, then you will see that, yes, it's an opportunity for a fraudster. Yes, I noticed that. I hope they can now see me. I've tried to put myself, I just, one of the, I think the participants was getting on that. Sorry for that. So as I said, vulnerability is crucial. We need to ensure that we make sure that you don't make, our systems are not vulnerable. We need to manage that. The other thing is, of course, the poor tone from the top and the middle. This is the cultural. We need to manage it. King David said that the tone begins from the top, but he also insists that the tone at the middle is critical at managing fraud, because these are the majority. The majority of managers are actually at the middle, and therefore we shouldn't ignore them. Lack of adequate internal controls, yes, that is crucial. Poor training and poor supervision are some of the things which we need to embark as accountable persons. Ineffective and anti-fraud programs. I know most organizations have this in place, but you need to review them very often and test and see that they are working. This is just not a matter of having good policies, having good anti-fraud strategies. All that is critical so that you are able to see that these things are working. This is just a quote. Nearly half of the reported incidences resulting in losses resulted to US dollars. A lot of money, millions of dollars were committed. So a lot of money is being lost via fraud. So who are the perpetrators of fraud actually? Who is a fraudster? Now, this is another thing. Fraudsters can be outsiders, insiders, or both. They collude. And the worst situation is, of course, when they collude. This is a situation where you don't want to have. Once you have insiders colluding with the outsiders, then it's terrible. Some of the research done was found that external perpetrators actually account for 39%. So they are always outside. They are looking for people internally. And internal perpetrators have accounted for 37. Collusion is 20. And that is the worst. Once they collude, the likelihood of it going through is there. Because now both people, the person internally understands the system, the other one has a sophisticated fraudulent method he wants to apply, and therefore once they meet, all this will be able to what? To do that. But you also need, as I said, the middle management is crucial. Middle management, as you can see, constitutes 37% in most organizations. Then the worst is to senior management. If you have senior managers committing fraud, that organization is really surviving on luck. Yes, I know my time is, I have a few minutes. I would like to go to just one of the key monsters, fraud monsters, is corruption. Corruption, I'm sure my colleague from the Financial Institution, Financial Intelligence Authority will talk about this. Corruption is one thing which is likely to thrive during this COVID era. And again, as accountable persons, we need to understand how does corruption come about, what are the key areas to look into. Of course, corruption is very complex and it's not something you can just fight single-handedly. It needs a joint force. And I think you can see, I just picked a few things to show you that as I showed you the figures of COVID-19, just look at corruption also, or the global, you can see the countries which are most corrupt there, and those which are also pulling up. When you look at the list which I put there, you notice that very few countries actually, not of the 180 countries which the Transparency International Index did a survey, only not more than 50% of them were able to pass the score of 50% and above. They did a score of 0 to 100, 0 meaning the best, and 100 meaning the worst. Now, if you look at the map which I showed you, you notice that most of the countries in Africa and also in Asia and also in South America, they are really corrupt. Uganda, you can see Uganda is there. Uganda was number 137, just scoring 28. Same thing with the Uganda squad with Russia, the same, and Kenya. But this is just for information, but to let you know that, yes, corruption is a complex thing, and it is one thing, again, we need to support the government. Now, just to mention of money laundering, as I see I have like 3 minutes. Money laundering is another thing we need to really ensure that we manage. There are 3 stages in money laundering. I'm not going to go through them and discuss. We know that there's placement, there's layering, and integration. But most important, what I want to talk about money laundering is the forms of money laundering. We have We have a number of money laundering types, and this is what I think as accountable persons we need to know. I am skipping the discussion on the stages. I just want to get the forms. There is a structuring and smurfing. This is one of the forms of money laundering. We need to understand how it works. Here, someone takes a total amount of money and breaks it into smaller, less suspicious amounts. And it's common, people, when they get big bulk money and they got it through a dubious way, they will try to smurf and pass it through the systems, legitimate systems. This is another thing we need, and it's common in the financial sector. We have the trade-based laundering, similar to embezzlement. Embezzlement is key. You all know what is happening. Typically involves altering invoices or business documents in order to disguise that money or business profits. Again, this is thriving. We have cash business laundering. If you deposit a large amount of cash for your trip. Hello, yes, I'm concluding. Yes, I'll be concluding shortly. Just to mention a few of them again, we have the bank capture and then the casino laundering. I have provided the notes. Then there's real estate, which is real. Real estate is well pronounced, I think, in developing countries. We need to manage that. The government of Uganda, to its credit, has put in a number of measures, which is a good thing. We need to understand this, but we need to also see how they are functioning. Are they able to meet the needs? And I'm very sure my colleague will be coming, will be telling us what the Financial Intelligence Authority has done and what has changed since then. We have enacted laws. You all know that there's the AML law 2013. There's the Anti Money Laundering Regulations 2015. We have some regulatory bodies who are helping on this. We have the Central Bank, we have the Bankers Association, we have the Directors of Public Prosecution, we have the Inspectors of Government, and we have the Intelligence Financial Authority, which I've just talked about. Then we also have the security agencies. All these are meant to help us in combating anti-money laundering. At a corporate level, and this is mostly in organizations and companies, we have policies. People have companies have their anti-fraud policies and strategies. There's the whistleblowing policy. We have codes especially for ethics, the leadership codes, and corporate governance, company values, all these, including integrity tests. I wanted to say that integrity and lifestyle audits are crucial in organizations, and these are not being done in most cases. We don't do live audits, we don't do integrity tests for people. I don't know either because probably the evidence on how to go about, but it is something crucial, as I said earlier. Of course, there are other measures other governments can take up, and I think our government is embracing some of them to manage conflicts of interest. Also in companies, this happens. Regulate lobbying activities and reinforce checks and balances in most companies and ministries. There's also need to tackle preferential treatment and empower citizens. How do you empower citizens? Those are things we can discuss. So the others, of course, I think my colleague will discuss. But finally, I just wanted to say that at a corporate level, as we go back, I think it's critical that we see that the identification, measurements, ranking, and management of risks is crucial in this organization. And the COVID has brought in a new emerging risks. And those risks, I've tried to enumerate some of them. We need to go and really have a risk register, which clearly helps you and identify these risks, grade them, and manage properly. We need to ensure that the technology we have is the right technology. You have a backup and you have business continuity plans in place. Also, we have to ensure that internal controls, policies, and the audit systems are working. Disciplinary action, as my colleague is in the disciplinary committee, is necessary. You cannot have people do things 1, 2, 3, 4 times and they are still in the organization. Then strong vendor management relations and the robust, as I said, robust business continuity plans in place. I want to reinforce it again and say lifestyle audits and integrity tests are crucial. As I conclude, the person that challenges you and holds you accountable is more than the person that watches you stay the same and continue with the mediocrity. Fraud thrives where situations are vulnerable and lifestyles affected. So any opportunity which comes across is a fertile ground for fraud. Thank you so much, and I hope I've tried to manage the time. Yes, Joseph.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Thank you very much, Dennis. Kindly also make sure that you go into the Q&A chat room and answer the questions that are there. There are certain questions which have already been shared, and you can kindly answer them. A number of them, around one of us was asking, are there any examples that you are aware of organizations that you can share? And then secondly, with increased use of online platforms for trade, how does one conduct a valuable KYC? There's also a question on how are enforcers going to enforce where challenges of COVID, being that with COVID now we have social distancing. So how do we ensure that as law enforcers, we are going to enforce this, especially where social distancing has come into place? Kindly go into the Q&A chat room, answer as many as you can. Then for some of them, I would ask you, once you've answered, you can still come back during the question and answer session, answer them still for the rest of the people.
Okay,
some people wanted to see your face.
Yes.
Some people wanted to see your face, so you want to make sure that.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then other people were talking about the slide presentations. I think the slide presentation, it depends on how you handle the when it comes. If you double click, it expands. So these are the new normals. We are going to learn some of these things along the way, and as much as possible, if you're using a phone, it may struggle to see the whole slides. But from my point of view, I can see the slides and I can see all the letters very well. Without any further ado, I want to introduce our next speaker. Thank you very much, Dennis. We shall come back to the Q&A session, where we shall have some of the questions still answered. Our next speaker is Mr. Lazarus Mukasa. Mr. Lazarus Mukasa is a certified anti-money laundering specialist. He has broad knowledge, skills, and expertise in anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism in Uganda, as well as financial crime detection and prevention. He's currently serving with Uganda's Financial Intelligence Authority as the manager, financial analysis, a position he has held for the last 6 years. Mukasa has grounded background in bank supervision, financial analysis. He has served in the Central Bank of Uganda as a senior banking officer from 2006 to 2014. Mukasa is a member of the Association of Certified Anti-Money Laundering Specialists, having earned his certification in 2019. In 2008, he completed a master's degree in business administration in the Catholic University of Milan, Italy. He's a graduate of Makerere University. He holds a Bachelor's of Science in Quantitative Economics. Welcome with me, Lazarus Mukasa, to take us through the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph, for the kind introduction. I'd also like to thank Dennis Secheru for laying the background for me in regard to fraud theories and its practice, especially in his sector. And also he has given a very good background on government interventions and institutional framework in place. So he has made a very good background for me. So my presentation will be rather brief because most of the ground has been covered by Dennis. So I'll begin with the outline. I'll basically talk about 5 things. I'll briefly introduce the Financial Intelligence Authority and what our mandate is. I'll go to the emerging money laundering and terrorism financing risks during this COVID pandemic. Basically, I'll be looking at it from the regulator's point of view, what we have seen in these few months of COVID, how the risks have evolved. Then I'll look at the impact of COVID-19 on the MLCFT regime. We shall look at what accountable persons need to know and to consider in this period so as to avert the identified risks, and I'll conclude. The Financial Intelligence Authority, for those who may not know, is a government of Uganda agency established in July 2014 under Section 18 of the Anti Money Laundering Act, with a core mandate of combating money laundering and financing of terrorism in Uganda. The functions of the FIA were stipulated in Section 20 of the law, and I'll briefly highlight them. One is to process, analyze, and interpret information disclosed to it and obtained by it in terms of the Anti-Money Laundering Act. Then we refer any matter or information derived from these reports we receive if to the relevant law enforcement agencies in Uganda and abroad as well. If on the basis of our analysis we have firm grounds to suspect involvement of money in money laundering, terrorism financing, or any other serious crimes. Then the other function, we inform, advise, and cooperate with other competent authorities. Now, competent authorities are defined as investigative, prosecutorial, judicial, or supervisory bodies of the government of Uganda. So we inform, advise, and cooperate with them in matters to do with money laundering and terrorism financing. We give guidance to accountable persons and competent authorities in regard to compliance with the law. We also collect fines adjudicated under the Act in case there are some convictions and fines issued. We are the authority mandated to collect the fines. We issued guidelines to accountable persons not under the jurisdiction of supervisory authorities. The law sets aside accountable persons, but some of them are not regulated sectors. For example, the real estate sectors. So it is the Financial Intelligence Authority, which is the regulator, and we issue guidelines to them on how they should prevent being used for money laundering. Then we also provide training programs for accountable persons, amongst so many other functions that we do. I've talked about accountable persons. I'll briefly highlight who they are. Because the law designates certain entities or individuals as accountable persons. Basically, these are businesses or professions whose services are most likely to be used by criminals to either launder money or fund terrorism. And these accountable persons, there's a whole schedule, it's called Schedule 2 in the law, where they are listed. They include banks, they include forex bureaus, they include accountants, and as defined in the Accountants Act. And these are all in the Schedule 2 to the law. The law sets obligations for accountable persons. Basically, these are things they are expected to do to ensure that they safeguard their systems, their businesses, their processes from being abused by criminals to launder money. There are many obligations, but I'll just highlight a few. One, they are expected to conduct regular anti-money laundering or financing of terrorism risk assessments to see how exposed they are to the risks of money laundering and financing of terrorism. They are expected to conduct sufficient due diligence, especially when onboarding customers, but also on an ongoing basis because customers' profile change over time. So the expectation is that periodically, depending on the risk profile of that customer, that accountable persons will conduct ongoing due diligence. The accountable persons are also expected to monitor transactions to ensure that they are in line with the known profile of the customer. In case these are out of line, they are not what is expected of the customer, then they are expected to file suspicious transaction reports with the Financial Intelligence Authority. Then lastly, among others, they are expected to keep records of all transactions they conduct for a period of 10 years. And the purpose of record keeping is basically to facilitate reconstruction of transactions in case of an investigation of financing. So it is very key that accountable persons understand the law to appraise themselves of the obligations they are under. But also, if we are here to interact with accountable persons to sensitize them, to make them know what is expected, and also to help them comply. that is the brief background on FIA. Now I'll talk about the COVID-19 pandemic and what we've seen from the point of view of the regulator as the emerging money laundering and terrorism financing risks. As you're all aware, this COVID-19 pandemic has really impacted countries, and we see businesses changing the way they operate. People are confined at home. There are so many aspects to this pandemic, and government has come up with different measures to contain the pandemic. You know the different measures we've had since March when the president announced the first ones, but just a few we have had: forced confinement or the lockdown, closure of non-essential businesses. We know some businesses like schools, bars, salons, they're not operational. We've had some government intervention by way of providing relief food, so there's been food distribution. There have been border closures so as to limit importation of the disease, but also we've had social distancing measures, among other measures put in place by government. Now, these measures are intended to combat or to contain the spread of the COVID pandemic, have presented opportunities for criminals to engage in fraudulent schemes and money laundering. We are seeing new threats which seem to be exploiting vulnerabilities which have emerged from the prevailing COVID situation. Because of having predators to the situations, some businesses like banks, they have had to be exposed to some vulnerabilities like we shall see below. So I'll look at the risks in terms of first of all, looking at the threats which we are seeing, but also the vulnerabilities in the different systems which have developed as a result of different efforts to contain the disease. The first threat, we are seeing an increased threat of frauds. Dennis has really done justice to fraud. I'll just basically gloss over it. We are receiving reports of criminals attempting to profit from this situation through various fraud schemes. One of them is counterfeiting of essential goods, including personal protection equipment, cases of counterfeiting sanitizers, testing kits, these masks we use. And so far the reports we've had, a few of them, indicate that it is done mainly in three ways, where these criminals present themselves as providers of these essential goods and express willingness to supply the same. In the process, many of them request for credit card information. After emptying your account, they disappear in thin air. The second option is they'll invoice you and request you to make an advance payment before the goods are shipped. But once you receive this advance payment, that will be the last you see of them. They don't deliver anything. However, I've also seen cases, reports of cases where they have actually gone ahead to deliver, but they deliver fake products because the processes previously of people moving to confirm quality of goods and all those things have been taken away by the COVID containment measures like closure of borders. So there is a lot of trust and relying on online communication. We've also seen fundraising for fake charities. Criminals posing as NGOs. There are some cases we're looking at, and they seek donations for COVID-related activities, whereas they have nothing on the ground. Then Dennis has talked about cybercrime, the email phishing attacks. Those ones we have received so many reports and provided intelligence to the investigative bodies which they are investigating. And we know that because some people are working from home, criminals get the opportunity of compromising the emails, especially when there are weaknesses in the network security of those organizations, and they end up accessing customer contacts and transaction information, which they fraudulently use to get money from people's accounts. Give an example of an instance where the FIA's email has been abused. They have not hijacked, but the criminals have formulated an email which has FIA in it. So to someone who is not very knowledgeable, they may think they're communicating with FIA. And they have informed these people that before you bring in money, especially during this period, the COVID period, you need clearance from FIA. And to get that clearance, you need to pay 10% of whatever you're bringing in. And to obscure their trail, they are telling these people to pay using cryptocurrency, especially Bitcoin. We've gotten wind of this, and we are on the trail for these criminals. And maybe at this point, I should make it clear that FIS services are not paid for. They are free. We do not charge for anything we do because we're a government entity and we get our resources from appropriation of the budget. So we do not charge anyone for anything that we do. But the public out there may not know it, and they may be falling prey to these cyber criminals. Now, those are the risks we've seen so far. Now I look at the vulnerabilities which the threats are trying to exploit so as to succeed in committing these fraudulent acts. We've seen changing financial behaviors resulting from COVID control measures, which are in place, and this has come with a number of vulnerabilities, including increased remote transactions. We know that especially, for example, banks have increased online banking activities, including customer onboarding and identity verifications. Now, these are schemes which, this mode of transaction is very attractive to criminals because, like people know, criminals fear face-to-face interactions because they may get caught. But if they are trying from afar, I'm sure they keep trying so many times knowing that the chances of being caught are very minimal. So there are risks of opening fraudulent accounts and using fake identification information. The other vulnerabilities, until now, many people have not been familiar with online platforms, online banking, telephone banking. People have not been very, very active. A few of them have been, especially the elites, but to a common man, these are the things they're not familiar with. And therefore, it makes them susceptible to fraud. They can be defrauded if they're using this. They don't know the security measures, the controls in place, and fraudsters can ride on this to defraud them. We've seen the risk of diversion of government funds. This has always been there even prior to COVID, but COVID is heightened because, as you may know, procurements under COVID, mainly emergency procurements, they may not be able to follow the PPDA Act, which requires this number of days of advertising, then notice of best evaluated bidder, and all those things, contract signing. Because most of these are emergency responses, people are using basically emergency procurement procedures, which are prone to abuse. As you are aware, there are some ongoing investigations into suspected inflation of relief food prices. I won't go so much into this since it's under investigation, but just to highlight that these are some of the vulnerabilities that can be exploited by the threat size so above. Recently, the government announced some stimulus measures, including in the fiscal area for taxation, but also providing liquidity and credit to affected businesses. This has not happened. We have no reports, but just being proactive, we think this is an area prone to abuse. There are some potential fraud risks in these stimulus measures, including some criminals may make fraudulent loan applications because they are targeting some sectors which are affected, like tourism. People may present fraudulent papers claiming to be in that particular sector just to access funding, whereas they are just fraudsters posing as businessmen. With the current COVID situation, of course, everyone is predicting an economic downturn, and this comes with some risks. Some sectors will not be doing so well. Find probably the real estate sector will be affected, and some businesses will be troubled, both liquidity and other capital adequacy issues. These are situations criminals want to exploit. They may come in and buy distressed businesses or real estate businesses in a bid to integrate, because I think Dennis was talking about the 3 stages of money laundering, which is placement, getting money and placing it to an account, layering, conducting complex financial transactions to conceal the origin of the dirty money, and then placement. This is now putting the money into the formal economy to basically legitimize it, and involves buying of assets and businesses, real estate, expensive items. So when these troubled businesses and sectors like real estate selling out, criminals want to come in at this stage to integrate their criminal proceeds. And knowing that in this period, probably the vigilance is not as high as it is under normal times. Again, we because of these measures, we are seeing increased physical cash transactions. Some people withdraw money because we're going into lockdown just to have some cash on them. But this also presents another money laundering challenge, because cash by its nature obscures the money trail. And as the Financial Intelligence Authority, the basic element we use in conducting an analysis is following the money. But once someone removes money from the formal financial system, then the money trail dies out. So we are seeing this as another potential vulnerability arising out of the COVID situation. The other issue of virtual assets, we are seeing increased use of cryptocurrencies as a layering method to launder money, because after getting money, they conduct difficult financial transactions which are difficult to trace by law enforcement, and virtual assets, by the mere fact that they create pseudo-anonymity, they become very attractive to launderers. I put out the case where they were trying to forge the FIA email. They knew that if they got money into a bank or mobile money, it is very easy for us to trace. So they were requesting their victims to pay through a Bitcoin so that they can enjoy that pseudo-anonymity and get away with the crime. The other vulnerability which we see is with the closure of borders, there has been a limit to physical transportation of cash. You know, some people, for some strange reason, prefer to cross borders with cash. You go to Dubai, crack a deal, and come back with $200,000. It is not criminal in Uganda to move with cash across the borders. The law just requires the person to declare at the port of entry or exit when you are crossing with money above 1,500 currency points, which is 30 million shillings. So we have mechanisms in place, although they are still developing, of monitoring such physical transportation of cash and negotiable bearer instruments. However, with the closure of borders, we have lost that avenue, and the fear is that now criminals may resort to informal means like the Hawala system, or even the virtual assets like we've seen above, to move money across borders. This one I hinted on it, criminals finding ways to exploit the temporary issues in internal controls caused by remote working to bypass customer due diligence measures, like the remote account opening or remote transactions. These are all avenues criminals can exploit to launder money. In terms of terrorist financing, we've not had any reports of terrorist financing resulting from this COVID situation. But because terrorist financing is the reverse of money laundering, all the loopholes which launderers are using, as enumerated above, can be used by individuals wishing to fund terrorism. So in terms of controls, like I'll highlight in my next slides, the accountable persons need to apply similar controls, only with a significant something to note that much as in money laundering monitoring, people look at amounts involved as one of the triggers for reporting. For terrorist financing, unfortunately, amounts don't matter, because people fund terrorism for as little as $100. So if you are focusing on amounts, it may not be possible to capture this aspect through transaction monitoring. So it requires other additional triggers to be embedded into the transaction monitoring system to be able to capture the terrorist financing aspects. So those are the vulnerabilities. And I'm going to briefly speak about how broadly COVID-19 has impacted on the ML safety regime. As I've mentioned previously, this disease has impacted on governments and accountable persons' abilities to implement AML CFT obligations, because both government entities like FIA and accountable persons have obligations. Because of the COVID containment measures in place, both the private sector and government ability to combat money laundering has been impacted in a way. We have seen, for example, reprioritization efforts by government resources, mainly focusing on fighting COVID-19 pandemic, and this is understandable. In the recent budget speech, we were informed by the Minister of Finance that yes, he presented those figures, but they need to go back to Parliament and realign it to the current priorities of government, fighting COVID being number one. So definitely when they realign the resources, some sectors have to suffer, and we believe like all other sectors, we continue to ML safety might be affected. One key aspect I can point out is the supervision on site inspections. Apart from not having, apart from resources being reprioritized, the current social distancing measures in place may not suit regulators conducting on-site inspections. So there will be more reliance on off-site surveillance, relying on reports submitted by accountable persons and believe that they are accurate. But also, where such reports are not available, we have to postpone the on-site inspections to such a period when it is considered safe to conduct them. We have had some accountable persons reach out to us after failing or delaying to submit the required reports. We've had situations where the required information is archived somewhere and people cannot move freely or in time to retrieve such information. And people have reached out to us and we've had some kind of workaround such situations. We've seen some closures of some branches, change in business hours, and the reprioritization of resources within the private sector, within the accountable persons. Because of limited revenues now, accountable persons find it fit to reprioritize their resources on what they consider high priority areas. Now, this is my second last bit. I'm going to look at what a accountable person should consider given the above risks as identified. One, we need to be online smart. We need to adopt stringent measures to safeguard data and information and resources. We know many of staff are working from home or remotely from somewhere, not coming together because of social distancing measures. But accountable persons need to have controls in place to prevent theft of data by employees working remotely. Within the formal working setting, there are some physical controls. For example, the officers who cannot reach a particular area because it is sensitive. But now with remote working, that is taken away, and accountable persons have to innovate to ensure that there are thorough data protection measures in place. The other thing is they may need to revisit the risk assessments and control frameworks and revise internal policies, procedures, and controls to deter abuse of non-contact business practices. Because this was not envisaged previously, some of the aspects encountered by accountable persons are not reflected in their current policies. So it is necessary, it is important to review this and see whether they are still fit for purpose. I've talked about the reprioritization of, the other aspect accountable persons need to consider is continuously evaluate customers' risk profiles, products, services, delivery channels, well cognizant of the fact that there is increased risk of fraud and cybercrime, because previous evaluation of customer profiles was based on the information which accountable persons knew before COVID, but now we are seeing other practices like increased cash withdrawals, for example, which may present a different risk profile of this customer. You may see people getting money into their accounts from online crowdfunding, claiming to be involved in the COVID fight. So these are issues which accountable persons need to continuously evaluate and update the customer risk profile as and when new information is obtained. Of course, with our scarce resources, it is important that accountable persons employ the risk-based approach. For example, when digitally onboarding customers and processing contactless payments, because resources are not enough, you may not apply resources, be it monitoring or reaching out to business in equal measure. Where you see more risk is where more resources should be applied. For example, when you're onboarding clients and someone opens an account as a student with minimal transactions indicated, telling they'll be receiving 50,000 as upkeep, you may not take a lot of effort in verifying most of the information provided because of the information you have that this is a low-risk customer if you do a risk profile. Whereas someone opens an account remotely in this period and they tell you they'll be receiving 2 billion every month, most of it is from abroad, they indicate risk jurisdictions as the source of funds, and they claim to be involved in other risky businesses like crypto or forex trading, then the risk profile will be high, which will call for a more close monitoring of the same. So risk-based approach is very key. Then the other issue is to be vigilant of emerging risks. I've highlighted above, but no one knows what will come tomorrow. So it is important to be vigilant and to detect and report any suspicions you see to the FIA. Then, yes, this goes together with the previous one. You need to assess new risks as you're vigilant. Risks will come. Keep on assessing the threats which your business is exposed to and the vulnerabilities in your processes, in your systems, in your people, which can be exploited, and revise continuously the email programs to address those threats and vulnerabilities. There's the transaction monitoring controls. We need to review the effectiveness of the current transaction monitoring controls. Look at the triggers which are in place. There are new triggers which could have come with the COVID pandemic. You need to embed them into your transaction monitoring system to ensure that suspicious transactions harboring triggers which were not previously captured do not sit through your transaction monitoring system. Then we urge your institutions to provide support to the compliance personnel working remotely to ensure that they adequately perform their duties. I talked about the resource allocation on a risk-based approach so that the scarce resources available are put to optimum use. You need to stay informed. As you're aware, the FIA issued a guidance some time back on COVID-19, and I'm sure we shall be coming up with such other communications as and when the need arises. So you need to review this and notifications from other regulators regarding COVID-19 related risks and compliance recommendations. Then the other one is, last one is communicate with the regulators, communicate with us. If you are experiencing any difficulties in meeting any regulatory requirements due to COVID-19 related circumstances, it is prudent to communicate with the FIA and other regulators to work with them to find a solution, because we know the challenging times we're in. We cannot pretend that everything is normal and we are applying the law in a straitjacket. So please communicate so that we find workarounds to most of these challenges we're facing. Yeah, so in conclusion, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought really unprecedented challenges. It is therefore pertinent for us regulators to closely work with accountable persons to address these challenges. We need to pay close attention to the emerging MLTF risks, because as we are fighting the spread of the disease, criminals are looking for loopholes, things which are ignored or neglected to exploit, to launder money, commit the fraudulent acts, or even fund terrorism. Reiterate that the FIA is available to support accountable persons to discharge their AML safety compliance obligations even during these challenging COVID times. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lazarus, and very insightful and very helpful presentation for every one of us. What I'm going to ask you as well, Lazarus, kindly also go into the Q&A chat, then you'll be able to answer some of the questions there. I'm going to read some of them, and I'll be distributing them between you and Dennis. In Uganda, Susan is asking, question one, in Uganda, especially during the COVID funds received from the various sources, how do we measure that there was money laundering? So if people come and they give you the money, how do you ensure that you receive it, but it's not being laundered? I'll give that one to Lazarus. And then number two was a question about, apart from financial services entities, which other accountable persons are mandated by law to file reports with IFA? I think Lazarus answered that question. Lawrence Bulenga said, will you go to the Schedule 2 of the Anti Money Laundering Act 2013? When you go to the Schedule 2, you'll see the whole list. It's a long list. So I wouldn't want us to, the schedule is already provided for there. Thomas Biencha is asking for CPA Dennis. This is for Dennis. The banks control and check credit or debit card transactions with the respective bank account holders before they clear or honor the third-party payments. Say, for example, I'm paying online to Jumia. How do you ensure that those transactions are checked? This is Dennis for you. Then I'm looking for one for Lazarus so that we have two for each of you to look at. What are the law enforcers supposed to do to fight this vice? Lazarus, you mentioned something in your presentation that due to the COVID-19 and social distancing, your government agencies are struggling because they were locked down. And so how do they ensure that they can stop? And how do they ensure this anti-money laundering is in place, especially given the fact that under lockdown? So Dennis, you have two questions, and Lazarus, you have two questions. I'll start with Dennis, then Lazarus will answer the other two.
Hello?
Yes, Dennis, you have unmuted the mic. You're fine. You're good to go.
Okay, fine. Thank you so much. There are quite a number of questions, and I'm happy. I want to thank those who have really sent their questions. I would quickly go through them, but you asked this one. This one says that do banks control and check credit, stock debit card transactions with the respective account holders before they clear and honor the third-party payments? Well, banks, of course, we have a vendor. You know, cards and credit, you have to enter into an agreement with the vendors. And when you enter, for example, I'll give you like Visa. Visa is one of those vendors which manage this. And once you enter into an agreement with them, there are certain, you know where your limits are and where you can also do the work. But normally, customers, I know where this is coming from. Customers do transactions. Some customers try to do transactions when they don't have money in their accounts. And if you get like for what Visa, what the vendors put in place, some of these banks necessarily don't have that control. But some of those vendors, if you went like, for example, out of the country and used a Visa card and probably you didn't have money on your account, you'll find that it can attract some charge. It's like bouncing or whatever check. So the banks, yes, do check that customers open accounts, they have money, but you don't have control of when a customer is transacting and he doesn't have money in his account. Okay? That was, I think it was asked by Thomas Biancha. Can I proceed? Hello? Hello?
Please proceed. Please proceed.
Yes. That was the question you had given me. There was another question.
Yes, you can look. You can look at other questions as well.
Okay, thanks. The other question was give live examples of organizations that have been duped with fake online platforms. This was by Eric Lubwama. Eric, thank you so much. Well, there are a number of organizations which have been duped, but what is important is, do you have systems? Like, for example, there are some people who send email which is exactly almost like yours, trying to make you to get your email, but they'll use a similar fake email. This has happened a lot in a lot of clients, especially in this era of digital. But what happens is that if you have system safeguards in place, all these things can bounce, or they will just be taken as spam, so they will not go through. There are a number of them. I don't want to list them. In relation to COVID, you've heard again also that there are some organizations which had tried to dupe, had come up and also put themselves that they are able to manufacture some of these. I think my colleague has listed them. They were even on the press last time, where it came out and said, please don't buy sanitizers from this company, don't buy from this, buy only 1 to 3 from genuine companies. These are the kind of things people are taking advantage of during this COVID era. Then we have another question, and this is coming from, I think, I don't see the name, but I can read the question. Yeah, it's from Fideli Mubangazi, yes. Fideli is saying that due to COVID-19 and social distancing as a whole, some law enforcers everywhere in the world may report interrupted access to secure AML. This may decrease capacities to pursue money laundering and other related cases. Law enforcement team may find it difficult to submit reports due to such interruptions. What are the law enforcers supposed to do to fight this? I think my colleague will be able to answer it, but what I know is that yes, there are those disruptions. There are others who are trying to hack into some of the systems so that they are able to do dubious things. But again, as I said, depending on how you procured your system and what kind of system you procured, some of this may not be able to get their way through. But it is correct. Those disruptors are there. They are being managed, and that's why the FIA came up, and I think they managed for the financial industry, banking industry. The FIA is managing this. They have a system which they have connected, which helps. Then the other question was, how has your institution tried to address the issue of fraud in the scale of 1 to 5? How would you rate the technical fraud in the financial institution sector without being so specific to an institution? This is an interesting question. Well, I don't want to say that, yes, we are perfect in the banking industry, but at least if you get cases, if you have been reading, if you really went and maybe even Google and see what is happening in other regions, if such frauds, if such losses were to happen in our country, then some of our organizations would not be working, because the others have been really hit billions and billions of US dollars of money. And that has not yet happened in our country. So at least, yeah, I would say, yes, we are managing it, but we want to see that we manage better. And I think that's why there's need for like FIA to come in place. They have helped, and this money laundering thing must therefore be managed according to the systems and the policies put in place. But as you said, yes, I can assure you, it is not about to go away. Fraud and money laundering is there, and they are studying systems. They are studying systems. The challenge is we need to comply with those modern systems so that we are not hit. And my colleague in FIA, they are doing all that. Then the other question was, clarify, why would a CPA, who is a partner in a firm of accountants, be an accountable person, yet the firm in which is practicing is also registered as an accountable person. Lazarus to answer. He's specifically telling Lazarus to answer this. I'll leave that for Lazarus. But as an accountant, I know that we have a professional allegiance as an accountant that you should, you must be accountable. The way professionals were brought. Of course, I know the firm reports, there's a body which manages, like for accountants, lawyers. That's why you see they are managed by that. But as a qualified accountant, you also have a professional duty, that professional allegiance. So I think Lazarus will top up on that. Then the other one was briefly highlight on what could involve a good fraud investigation strategy. This is another topic for another day.
Yeah, that should be a topic for another day.
That's another topic.
We can't handle that
summarize
now.
that.
Yeah.
Then just to the second last, I think, with the increase in the use of
Lazarus will come in after.
Okay. With the increase in the use of online platforms for trade, victims are sometimes asked to make payments in advance via bank transfers and then directed to collect or receive goods later. This is like payment in advance. In other words, he's telling this gentleman saying that the risk is really high. You pay and you are doing it online, you don't know the other side. So that now brings us to the laws. What laws are in place? What contracts have you entered into? How do you relate with that person? So that can you take this case after? Can it be in the eyes of law? Can you pursue it? These are the things you need to know. So therefore, as you enter into an activity or a transaction, you must be able to know whether it's legally binding, so that you are able to pursue. Otherwise, this is the modern thing. People are going into that, and once it's like those days, during this COVID, everything people saw that you should meet physically, but now there are virtual meetings. Even documents are being exchanged online. So once this the law passes this, then it will be binding. You just need to know whom you are transacting with, and you understand that. Sometimes goods or services may not be delivered or are counterfeited or ineffective. In these circumstances, how does one conduct valuable KYC activities, such as due diligence on customer onboarding activity, verification risk, and what? This is another topic, as you said, it's a good topic on KYC and how to do due diligence. I can assure you this varies from business to business organization. You want to know the kind of goods, the kind of business, the kind of people involved, the kind of management company, all those things you have to understand. Then you can do a better due diligence and say, yes, this company is registered by law. It is does business in this area. It has these directors. Then you can understand better. So again, as I said, that's another topic. What are the key areas to be reviewed for easy fraud identification? There are no easy areas depending on what. Fraud is a complex thing, and you might look at it as a simple thing, but it's a complex thing, and you must take it seriously. Don't just say this is the easiest thing with the cash, I can do this. Of course, there are more complex ones. That is there. But when it comes to fraud, that's why they say fraud is zero tolerance. They must do zero tolerance and does not know relations, does not know what. So when you are doing fraud identification and investigation, it is crucial that you don't think that this is a simple one, this is the easy one. But of course, there are more complex fraud identification areas. What are the risks and how can, yes, this is
the last one.
Okay, the last one.
Great.
Okay, what are the, which one?
One you're going to read should be the last one because we want to give Lazarus also opportunity.
Okay, I can give Lazarus. Let me leave Lazarus also because there are any more questions that I've seen again. But I will. Yes. What I'll do for the colleagues who have sent this. I'm happy their names are there. I'm actually going to send some responses to them and also get in touch with some of them so that they get the benefit of these webinars. I promise to do that for all these. If you put a name, please. I'll try to see. Maybe email now. I'll try to get to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dennis. CPA Dennis. Even the institute already has requested that if you have any email, any questions, you can still send them by email to the Institute and they'll get answered. Lazarus, you have exactly 10 minutes. We need to have the webinar closed before 4 o'clock.
Okay, thank you, Joseph. I'll answer quickly what I can now in the given time. And like you've indicated, what I've not answered here, we shall give a comprehensive response to the participants of this webinar. I'll start with, there was a question on the relationship between corporate governance and anti-money laundering regimes, and asking at what stage can corporate governance operate to break the money laundering chain. Corporate governance is very key in AML fight, and like pointed out by Dennis, the tone has to be set from the top, from the board. So it's the board which sets the anti-money laundering strategy, it monitors the implementation, and sets the policies, allocates resources to the different units fighting money laundering. So the board is very key in fighting money laundering in institutions, and at what stage? At all stages, because you never know at what stage the money laundering will come to your institution. Sometimes they come to you at the placement stage, or they may use an accountant in the procurement of property, which is integration, the last stage. So corporate governance is very key at all stages in the money laundering chain, and the board plays a key role, the oversight role. Then there was a question from, they are related, Susan Nalwera and Alan Amanya on virtual assets, cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin. What are the risks and how can we respond to them? How prepared is FIA? There are very many risks in cryptocurrencies, the virtual assets. The time given to me may not be enough, but what I can say broadly is that they promote anonymity. They call it pseudo-anonymity. I may call it anonymity because it's not easy to know the people transacting in this chain. The other one is they are not regulated, especially in Uganda. There's no regulation of cryptocurrencies. But how prepared we are, we've done quite a number of things. We've first of all educated ourselves. We've educated our staff, capacity building, to first of all understand what they are, how they can be exploited before we reach out to other people. So we built capacity internally to be able to understand what is fraudulent and what is not fraudulent, and how we can come in. The second one is a policy issue, because they are not regulated by anyone and we see vulnerabilities in them, they are prone to being abused. And in line with the Financial Action Task Force guidance, we've reached out to Minister of Finance to have them added to the schedule of accountable persons so that they start reporting to us like all other accountable persons. I know this proposal has been presented on the floor of Parliament on the first reading, and currently it's before the Finance Committee of Parliament. Once that is done, then we shall have them under our purview. Then there was a question of people dishing out loads of money in the name of helping the needy in this COVID period. Yes, of course, we take note of all those that are acting, things which are happening. We receive reports from both accountable persons, but also from media. That allows us to get information from all sources. So the answer is yes, we are aware, we know what's going on. And we do the work. We will not be able to discuss everything on this platform, but when there's criminality, we definitely will see investigations. When there's no criminality, there is no reason for us to act, because if I have established a source of money, dishing out money in Uganda is not a crime. So it's only when we have a sense of criminality that we can be able to proceed with such situations. There was someone who said the annual compliance reporting link on our website is not working. Yes, sorry, Stephen, our website has been, they are revamping it currently to make it more interactive and deliver more information to our stakeholders. So maybe you just have to be patient. A few days, maybe 2-3 days, I'll bring it to the attention of our IT team. It should be back on. Deadline for filing with FIA, which I adjured. There are 2 reports. Is the large cash transaction report, all transactions above 20 million. Those reports are filed weekly, so it's every Tuesday for transactions of the preceding week. Then the suspicious transaction report, the deadline, the timelines are stipulated in the law. So an accountable person has 48 hours after forming suspicion to file a report with the FIA. So those are the timelines for the 2 reports. how easy is it to recover property of launderers? 1B, it is not easy, I would say, because launderers go to great lengths to conceal their property, conceal money trail and all those things. But with innovative techniques of analysis and using the systems we have to uncover networks and assets owned, it can be done. I know we've had some 2 convictions of money laundering in this country, and the assets have been recovered. So yes, it's not easy, but we are not here to do easy things. It can be done. Receiving money from abroad in this pandemic period, how do we ensure that money is not laundered? These are not processes of crime. The key issue is doing due diligence. You need to know that the source of money of the person giving the money, it is very, very paramount, because money laundering is a lesser evil, but God forbid if you're used for terrorist financing. So we encourage accountable persons to always do thorough due diligence to try to understand the source of the money they're taking in. I think the time given to me is up. The rest of the questions I can address in the elaborate written response. Thank you.
I want to take this opportunity to thank you very much, Dennis and Lazarus, for your time. We don't take it for granted, and also for ably presenting to us the two sessions. Thank you very much from on behalf of the ICPAU, and also on my own behalf. I would say thank you very much, and we can always send you our flowers for a great job done. Thank you very much. I want to just make 2 announcements. I know the curfew time is almost up, so I'm sure I'm seeing at the start we had 500 people. Now I'm seeing we have dropped to 400. So just 3 things I wanted to say. Thank you very much for always coming and attending the webinars. And I want to say thank you very much to ICPAU for allowing us to have these webinars. And then secondly, for those of us who are in good standing, the voting process has started immediately. I've already voted, so please go and vote wisely. The process is very simple and simplified. It will be done within 5 minutes, I can assure you. The token will come and you'll be done. Thank you very much. I want to hand over to Ambrose for any other housekeeping items. And from me to you, thank you very much. See you next year, because today is the 30th of June. Next year is tomorrow. So see you next year. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, Joseph. Joseph, we thank you for steering this session. We also thank our presenters, Lazarus and Dennis, for taking us through this afternoon session. I would also like to thank the participants for attending this webinar. Our next webinar is on 3rd July from 11 to 1 p.m. and it is on IFRS 15, as you can see. And as Joseph has mentioned, electronic voting is ongoing. With COVID, we have also learned to innovate. We've moved from analog voting to electronic voting. So if you're in good standing, please visit the site anytime. We close on 15th, just shortly, on 15th of July, just shortly before midnight. So you can do it at your leisure. You can use your phone. It is very, the platform is very interactive and easy to use. We thank you and wish you a blessed evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.